Hello, Troy Francis in Warsaw, joined by Dr. Silk. And what we're going to talk about in this video is asking questions. Now, asking questions has been demonized in the dating community for some time. And I think what people are talking about here is, say you see an attractive woman, you want to go and have a conversation with her, you walk up to her and you say, hey, just saw you, had to come over and say hi. So what do you do? Where are you from? How do you get into work? Where do you live? Do you like living there? What do you do on Friday night? Blah, blah, blah. And you machine gun her with questions. I think rightly that has been frowned upon. And dating gurus, dating experts will say, well, don't do that. That's a bad thing. But what's then happened as a result is that almost asking any question at all in an initial interaction is now seen as bad. It's seen as you shouldn't do that. And in fact, the science suggests, or the science points quite strongly to the fact that actually we probably even need to be asking more questions. So how do we reconcile these two things? How do they ask questions, like, are questions a bad thing? And if they're not a bad thing, how do they ask questions in a way that is, creates attraction rather than kills it?
Okay, so first of all, we can say that, you mentioned science, yeah. And the cutting edge science from Harvard University are saying that they have done lots of scientific research about the power of questionnaires and in the social setting. And what I can say directly, backed by leading scientists all over the world, is that there's no question about not asking questions, because the questions are the key to create connection. But we do have one thing that we have to point out, and that is like, while the right questions is creating connection and likability in the strongest sense, wrong questions can actually hurt likability almost in the same amount. So it's not about not asking questions, it's about asking the right questions.
Right, okay. And without going too much into the detail of this, but what's a way of doing that? What would you say are the wrong questions? And then what is an example of something that's more like the right kind of question to be asking?
One of the most important things is like we have different kind of how to actually structure the questionnaire, sort of.
Okay.
But those structure is in line with your genuine self. So everything we're going to ask about is going to come from a genuine standpoint. However, if we're going to go with questionnaires that sounds like an interview mode, there are questionnaires that doesn't really reflect the answer to the questions, and that is the problem.
Well, the argument was always, say you see somebody, you're attracted to them, you walk up to them, you're like, hey, had to come and say hello, and then you start bombarding them with questions. The argument was always, well, you haven't provided any value yet, so why should she stand there and answer all these questions about you? You're not a policeman, you're not a judge. Why should she stand there and give you all this information when you're the one who's approached her and you haven't really demonstrated any value yet? So you've got to be quite careful about the way that you're delivering these questions and the type of questions you're asking, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, when we're talking about you haven't demonstrated enough value yet, I mean, what is value then? So when we look at the scientific papers about what is actually value in terms of creating connection, that is actually asking the right questions. It's part of the whole package of actually creating connections. But as you said, asking the wrong questions hurt the likability and the connection. Asking the right questions is like you open the door for everything, in my meaning. So asking the wrong questions means that you're going to ask a lot of random questions that stays on the surface level.
Okay.
And we're not talking about questions in terms of new topic. We're talking about questions that leads to an answer, and then we have another range of questions that we used to call follow-up questions.
Okay.
And that is where the key lies. However, in order to do it right, you have to learn this with intent. There's nothing that you have it normally in our system in the brain. We are not wired to think that way. So we need to learn asking the right questions with intent.
Okay, so it's not that questions are bad as such, it's that asking shallow questions that are just there to sort of keep the conversation going, that's bad, and that can actually sabotage your chances. But if you're asking the right questions, that actually strengthens the the connection. And I think you mentioned
Absolutely.
you mentioned a study earlier where it suggested that asking up to 9 questions is a
Yeah,
good
okay,
thing.
so again, now this is actually a study made by Harvard Business School. And Harvard Business School is a little bit different from Harvard University in terms of the communication lab, but they are doing amazing research as well. And what Harvard Business School actually did in terms of research was that they saw that people that actually asked more than 9 questions in the interaction on the date, because that was like on the dating scene, on the date had a lot more likability than people that was asking 4 questions or less. So there is definitely something that is going on here in terms of creating connections. But they have to be the right ones.
So you could even say, if somebody's listening to the old school advice and they're like, "Oh, I can't ask any questions because that's bad," they're actually shooting themselves in the foot. They're sabotaging themselves.
Absolutely. I can be confident and say that yes, they do. And I mean, I don't know where they get their data from. Maybe from own personal experience, but the data I get and I receive is from the communication faculty. I mean, we know what we are talking about.
I think it's like we've said before. I think it's that they're partly basing it on personal experience, but they're basing it sort of on common sense. But the problem can be sometimes that you lack nuance, and you throw away the good with the bad. So you say, okay, it's bad through my observation to ask her 10 questions in a machine gun style right at the beginning of the interaction, but they were asking the wrong types of questions. So then they say all questions are bad and it all gets thrown out, but that's throwing out the good questions as well. And, and so they, you know, and it's not anybody's fault particularly because they haven't necessarily studied the science here, but they lack the nuance to understand that the right kind of questions are actually going to help you in the objective as opposed to hinder you.
Yeah, but it's also about asking questions in terms of seeking clarity and clarification on the answers. That's the key. I mean, if we want to ask random questions, for example, like if we want to ask the questions like, so do you live here around? And she said, yes, I live here. Oh, that's cool. I like the place. And that's it. I mean, for a girl to live in this place, in Warsaw, for example, I mean, that means everything for her because she lives here. Her whole life is based on being here. But just asking that question, get one answer about this one, and then just acknowledge that she lives here, and that's it. And then suddenly we go on to another question. I mean, that's almost rude to ask without actually seeking clarity of what she actually answered you.
Yeah,
so that is like one of the secrets.
And there's an opportunity there which you then squandered without delving deeper into that very key subject matter.
That means everything for the girl. But in order to think in those terms, you know, like her relationship to the city and those kind of things has to be learned with intent once more. We don't have it naturally. We can't learn this naturally. We have to learn it with intent.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in finding out more about this and potentially even working with Dr. Silk one-on-one, he does take a few clients, but it is very much a first come, first served because as you can imagine, he is very popular at the moment because this stuff is absolutely cutting edge. All you need to do is drop me an email, troy@realtroyfrancis.com, and we can get on the call and we can figure out whether you're the right fit to work with Dr. Silk. But in the meantime, thanks ever so much as always. Great insights into the field of asking questions, and we'll see you again very soon in the next video.
All right, thanks for having me, Troy.